hurt feelings. So when I was young, like these guys, sometimes my parents would leave me home alone with my older siblings, and we would kind of trash the house. Anybody else? I'm in trouble with this thing today. Sorry about that. So we would kind of trash the house, and when we knew that my mom was about to come back, we'd go nuts cleaning up. Right? She's coming, she's coming, she's coming. And so when I hear these scriptures that talk about Jesus coming back, sometimes I think about that fear of, oh, Jesus is coming back, am I ready? You know, keep your lamps burning, be ready. You don't know what time that Jesus is coming back. And maybe that's because I've heard a few sermons that say things like, if you were to die tonight, do you know where you're going? If you were to die tonight, do you know where you're going? Are you ready? Is it possible that if you die tonight, you might go to hell? And those are scary sermons, and I know that those kind of sermons can sometimes fill a church as people go, ooh, I better be ready. We don't do that so much in the Methodist Church, and I think some people think Methodists don't believe in hell. That is part of our teaching. We believe that God gives us free choice whether to be with Him or not, and we get to choose whether we want a relationship with God or not. But there's a few reasons why we don't preach that way, why we don't do that usually in our church. One is that we don't just look at being with God as something that happens after we die. We believe that accepting Christ, that living a life in relationship with God begins now, here, on this earth. And we want to enjoy it now and not just, say yes to God to buy insurance for when we die. We want that fullness of life to be with us in this life. And the other reason is if people are motivated by this message of, accept God or you're going to go to hell, it's a fear-based form of evangelism. And we prefer a grace-based form of evangelism, the kind of evangelism that says, come to God because God loves you. Come to God because God gives you a rich and full life. And so we want people to be motivated not by that fear, but by that love. But I think because of that, sometimes we miss the power and the urgency of verses like this that say, be ready. Be ready. Because no matter what your theology, we have to be ready for God to come into our lives, whether it's at the end of time, whether it's at death, whether it's 5 minutes from now. Because God is always coming to us. We believe that Jesus left this earth in body, but that He sent the Holy Spirit, and that the Holy Spirit is working among us and around us and within us. And there are always these opportunities where God can come and show up. These open doors, these times where you have to make an important choice. These times where you're faced with a great tragedy and you have to deal with that. These times when God opens a door for you. I wanted you to hear that Keep Your Lamps Trimmed and Burning song. I found this version that had this artwork because that song was used as a spiritual, and it was used at the time of the Underground Railroad. They were singing a hymn, but they were also reminding people, be ready because somebody's coming to rescue you from slavery. And so we have to be ready for those opportunities when God is going to bless us. We have to be ready for those times where God whacks us over the head in a lot of different ways. I was thinking about this friend of mine who grew up with no religious background, with no faith. Her mother was Jewish, her father was Christian, but they didn't practice any religion. And I just felt like, how do you get through life without prayer, without faith, without a Christian community? And when I would try to talk to her about it, it was kind of a closed door. And sometimes it felt a little awkward, and so we just didn't really talk about it that much. But one night I had gone to an Emmaus thing, to a church service, and it was going to be late at night, and it was going to be out by the lake, and she lived out there. So I said, can I sleep at your house so that I can go to this service, and then I don't have to drive all the way home after? So when I came home to her house, it was about 11, and my family knows I go to bed way too early. So I was really sleepy, and I just wanted to go to bed. And so she was waiting up for me, and she said, tell me about this thing you went to. And we ended up talking for about 2 hours. This open door that I wanted to just talk to her about the life of faith happened naturally. And I was so sleepy, but I had to be ready because here was an opportunity to help someone live a joy-filled life. And so there are many ways that God calls us to be ready. To be ready for death, to be ready to answer to God, to be ready for an opportunity. And so are you ready? Are your lamps lit? Are they burning? we have these parables today that use this metaphor of a lamp. And as I told the kids, if you think about everything it would take to just have, they really were that small. That's why they would use a lampstand to lift it up. And if you go to antiquity stores in the Middle East, they're full of these things. You can even buy one from the time of Christ. They were very, very common, and they're around a lot because they had them, they break, they leak. They had to make new ones. But this is how they got their light. And they didn't hold that much oil, so you had to have a supply of oil. And the oil came from crushing olives. That was a lot of work. You couldn't just, as I told the kids, flip a switch. You had to do a lot of things so that in the pitch black night, where there was only the stars, you could quickly light it to have the wick just the right way, and all of those things. And so Jesus uses that as a metaphor to say, is your spiritual life ready? Is your soul ready? A lot of us do New Year's resolutions, and there's kind of different categories. I'm going to lose weight, I'm going to get healthy, I'm going to learn. And I read somewhere, what is your spiritual resolution? And I never thought about, making a resolution at the beginning of the year that says, at the end of the year, I'm going to be different spiritually. What would that look like if I was richer spiritually? Have I ever, I could say I want to lose this many pounds, or I want to take this class, but to say I want to be different in the year, I want to be ready. So what are you doing to get ready? So in the first parable, there are these 10 women. And the scripture that I like to use, the New Revised Standard Version, it says virgins, but you could also say young women. Some of the translations say bridesmaids. I like that one. Sorry, I'm being so distracted with this thing. So the 10 women have to have not only their lamps, but their oil. And 5 of them do, and 5 of them don't. And weddings in ancient days, we get an invitation for a wedding now, and it says Saturday, August 5th at 6:30 or whatever. They didn't do that because people would have to travel, and travel was very unpredictable, and people wouldn't just come for 1 hour or a few hours, they would come for days. And so people would start arriving, and the wedding wouldn't start until the groom arrived, and you didn't know when he was going to arrive. He could arrive today or tomorrow or the next day. So the wedding happens when the groom shows up, and everyone waits for him. And so these bridesmaids are waiting, and maybe they're waiting days. And some of them are ready for it to last days, and some of them aren't. And all of us know that feeling of not being ready for something that's going to happen. And so in the second parable, all right, try that again. In the second parable, there's, hold it this way. The second parable, there's the master leaves his slaves in charge of the house. And this is a really good metaphor too, because God leaves us in charge of the earth. And when God shows up, what is the earth going to be like? What have we done with our earth? God leaves us in charge, and so they have to be ready, because if he comes in the night, they have to be able to have light for him. And so both of these parables, there's that idea of readiness. I really like this book, Parables from the Backside. J. Ellsworth Kellis, he does several backside books, and he takes biblical stories and he looks at them from a different angle. And so he looks at this parable of the oil and the lamps from the standpoint of the guy that sells oil. And he says, here's these women, and 5 of them come to buy oil from him. And he says, well, aren't there more of you? Aren't they going to buy oil? I don't know. They're not here. And late at night, they come knocking at his door saying, we need oil, we need oil. And he says, well, you should have been here earlier. I ran out. I don't have any to sell you. And he's brokenhearted because he knows that they're not going to be able to take part in this wedding. They're not going to be able to make it back. They're not going to be able to see where they're going. And he could have helped them, but it's too late. All right, never had this much trouble with a microphone in my life. Sorry, y'all.
We can hear you.
You can hear me. You know what? You can also hear me from here. Ha-ha. So it's good that I'm here because Jesus talks about this being ready. And he says, do not be afraid, little flock, for it's your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. This is the nature of God. God wants to bless us. God wants to give us the kingdom, but we have to be ready. So that's part of why we don't look at God as a punishing God, because of scriptures like this that say God wants to bless you. But you have to be ready to receive that blessing. And so I think about that guy selling the oil. And Callis says he likes that perspective because he feels like he's the oil seller. Hey people, I want to give you a spiritual life. I, as a pastor, want to fill you up to give you a spiritual life. But if you don't show up, I can't. And so I might encounter you when a loved one has died. I might encounter you when you have a cancer diagnosis. I might encounter you when you just had a spouse leave you and you have no oil. You have no light. You have no spiritual life because you didn't fill up when you had the opportunity. You didn't learn to pray when things were good. You didn't build community around you when things were good. You waited until crisis. And now I'm going to help you as best I can, but I can't do everything for you. And so he says, I feel like the person selling the oil and the lamp saying, well, why weren't you here earlier? And so Jesus warns us about this. He warns us that we need to fill our lamps. And when he talks about the person who sells the oil, he says, in the parable, they ask the other girls, can I have your oil? And they say, well, no, we need it. And that sounds kind of mean, but in reality, our own spiritual lives, we have to fill up ourselves. We can't depend on somebody else's oil. You can't depend on your parents' faith, your best friend's faith, anybody else's faith. It's up to you. And other people can only give you so much if you don't open yourself up and fill up in those times when God is reaching out to you. And so we see this picture of God who longs to fill us. But what are you doing to be filled? What are the ways that you fill yourself up? I'm conscious of the fact that you guys are here for a few minutes on Sunday, and sometimes we have distractions, like I can't keep my microphone on, and I worry that it's so little. I'm giving you so little to feed you for the whole week. And if that's your only diet, that's not enough. And so what are you doing outside of Sunday morning to fill yourself, to build your spiritual life? What fills you up? What lights your lamp? Is it being around certain people? Is it doing certain things? Is it praying in a certain way? Is it reading certain things? Is it doing certain things? And are you doing that? Are you filling your lamps? Are you filling yourself up so that you can be ready whenever God comes? I think about my sister and her family. Some of you came to the parsonage on Wednesday. We had a little gathering to talk about worship. And my sister Helen was there, so some of you met her. She lost her son to cancer in February. He was 28. And he had cancer for 4 years. And it was a hard and long 4 years. He was in Austin and she was in Laredo, so they'd come stay with us when he had his treatment. So we got to be very close to it. And it was really rough. But my sister and her husband have very full lamps and extra jars of oil. They're very faithful people. They pray together. They worship. They serve their church. And so I watched them as my nephew got sicker and sicker and thinner by the end. He looked like a skeleton. But their faith was so strong. And I realized that they couldn't just flip on a switch and have that faith. That it came from a lifetime of filling their lamps, of gathering their oil, so that when that very difficult thing happened, they had that faith to draw on. And so in these parables, Jesus is using this image of a lamp, an image people knew so well. And they knew the preparation it took to have a lamp ready. And he wanted them to be warned, I'm coming back, I'm coming to you. Things are going to happen in the future. Are you ready? Are you full? What are you doing to keep your lamp lit? I love that hymn, and I love the refrain that says, children, don't be weary. Children, don't be weary. I know a lot of you have worked long and hard to keep your lamps lit, and so don't be weary. That work is important. You don't always see the immediate rewards of it, but the rewards of working on your faith, working on your prayer life, doing those things that fill you and feed you, has eternal benefit. And so children, don't grow weary. Amen?